Welcome back to Succeed Against the Odds. Thank you for being part of this amazing community. You are what makes this podcast such a joy to create. And if you're new here, to my new listeners, a big warm welcome to the family. Today, we are diving into a topic that hits close to home for so many of us: the difference between selfishness and self care. Now, before we jump in, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt confused about whether you were prioritizing yourself in a healthy way or just being inconsiderate? Or have you seen actions in the world that left you wondering, how could someone be so self serving? Let's explore this today. Let's start with selfishness, because this is where the confusion often begins. Selfishness is about acting in ways that prioritize your own interests at the expense of others. It's not just about taking care of yourself, it's about disregarding how your actions impact those around you. Think of it as the me first mentality. Selfishness says, my wants, my needs, my preferences matter more than yours always. And it creates division, resentment, and ultimately harm to the community as a whole. I'll give you a practical example. Imagine someone who cuts in line at the coffee shop because they think their time is more valuable than everyone else's, or someone who refuses to consider different perspectives or make room for others' needs, believing that their way is the only way. That's selfishness. It disregards fairness and mutual respect. But selfishness doesn't just show up in these small everyday examples. It can take on a larger, more systematic form. When individuals or groups choose to elevate their own interests while ignoring or undermining others, it's still selfishness. It's an unwillingness to share, understand, or create equity. And the ripple effects of that can be devastating, eroding trust and creating an environment where empathy and compassion are pushed aside. Here's the thing about selfishness: it's not just harmful to others, it's harmful to the person being selfish too. Why? Because selfishness isolates, it pushes people away. Over time, the focus on me leads to a lack of connection, understanding, and ultimately fulfillment. When we operate from a place of selfishness, we're shrinking our world. We're closing off opportunities to grow, to learn, and to connect. And that doesn't just limit us, it limits the potential of the communities that we are part of. I want to emphasize something: selfishness isn't always intentional. Sometimes it's rooted in fear, insecurity, or even ignorance. The key is to recognize it and to choose a better way. Now, let's shift gears to self care, because this is where the magic happens. Self care is not selfishness. Let me say that again. Taking care of yourself is not selfish. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Self care is about ensuring that you have the energy, health, and peace of mind to show up fully for the people and responsibilities in your life. Self care is intentional. It's about saying, I matter and I need to make time for myself so that I can be my best self for me and for others. And let's be real, the world needs more of that. Think about it this way: when you board on a plane, during the safety instructions, the flight attendants always tell you to put on your oxygen mask before helping someone else. Why? Because you can't help others if you're gasping for air yourself. Self care is your oxygen mask. So, how do you know whether you're practicing self care or slipping into selfishness? The difference lies in intention and impact. With intention, self care asks, what do I need to feel balanced and healthy? Selfishness says, what do I want, regardless of how it affects others? And with impact, self care creates harmony. It allows you to recharge so that you can contribute positively. Selfishness creates division, leaving others feeling disregarded or hurt. Here's an example. Let's say you've been feeling overwhelmed and you decide to skip a social event to recharge. That's self care. But if you cancel last minute without communicating, knowing it will inconvenience someone else, that's leading into selfish territory. See the difference? Now, I want to circle back to something important. Sometimes selfishness isn't just personal, it's collective. When groups or communities act in ways that prioritize their interests while ignoring the needs of others, it's selfishness on a larger scale. For example, imagine someone refusing to acknowledge another person's struggles or refusing to share resources because they believe their comfort is more important than fairness. That's selfishness. And it has consequences, not just for the individual involved, but for the larger community. But here's the good news: we have the power to break this cycle. By choosing empathy over entitlement, understanding over judgment, and self care over self interest, we can create a world that works for everyone and not just a select few. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with 3 actionable takeaways. 1. Reflect on your intentions. The next time you make a decision, ask yourself, is this about sustaining myself or am I disregarding someone else's needs? 2. Practice empathy. Make space to understand the perspective and experiences of others. It's one of the best antidotes to selfishness. Put yourself in other people's shoes. 3. Prioritize self care without guilt. Remember, taking care of yourself isn't just good for you, it's good for everyone who depends on you. All right, that's it for today. Selfishness and self care may seem similar on the surface, but they couldn't be more different. Selfishness isolates, but self care empowers. It's about balance, empathy, and showing up fully, not just for yourself, but for others too. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who needs a reminder that self care isn't selfish. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and tune in next time for another thought provoking episode of Succeed Against the Odds. Thank you so much for listening and for being here today. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and make sure to share it with your friends. You can find the links mentioned in this episode and all of the show notes at francescaanastasi.com/podcast. And you can also find us on YouTube. Once again, thank you so much for being here today. Until next time, embrace your magnificence.